The Tectoy Sega Master System is an officially licensed Sega Master System that is distributed only in Brazil, making this one of the oldest consoles still in active production. Take the word console with a grain of salt, because what this is a console on a chip, and it's pretty disappointing. Now, I paid way too much money to get my hands on one of these, and I was thoroughly disappointed with the end result, and that's on me. But we're going to take this bad boy, we're going to gut it, and we're going to make it into the ultimate Sega console by combining it with another piece of technology that I rarely use in my home. Stay tuned and be prepared to be disappointed. Have you ever wondered what's inside one of these? This is the RG35xx Plus, and while I like it, I don't use it very much, mostly because I have other handheld gaming consoles that do similar things, that actually have joysticks and a little bit more capability than this guy, but this is a pretty impressive emulator in a small form factor. I actually did a video a while back on my TikTok looking at some of the emulation capabilities of this guy. One of the cool things that it was able to do was Dreamcast at full 60 FPS. I didn't take it beyond that because I didn't really care that it could do much more. And there's a reason that I'm taking this apart now. So let's go ahead and take this apart and take a look at the inside so we can get a good look at what makes these things tick. Taking these apart isn't really that hard if you have the right tools. I've already kind of pre-done it here, but to get to the battery pack, you just need a standard Phillips screwdriver, small one. And to get into the console itself, you need this special bit here, the H1.5 is what it's called. If you have a screw kit like this, it's really easy. But if we lift this off here, you can see that the battery is attached to the board. We're just gonna unplug that and we'll take a look at the board and see what makes this guy tick. From there, all we're going to do to get this guy fully freed up from its plastic casing is to unscrew a couple more Phillips head screws here. You can see here, this is where the screen connects to. This is the 4 shoulder buttons that were on the back here. This guy's unique because it had an HDMI out, well, a mini HDMI out, so you could hook it up to your TV and use it kind of like a game stick, like one of those game sticks you see all over TikTok. In addition, down here, there was a USB-C port for charging and data transfer. And 2 SD card slots, meaning you could cram a lot of games onto this thing. But let's go ahead and get these screws out. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws we need to get out, so. Alright, screws are out. We just need to disconnect this ribbon cable so we don't tear anything in case I want to disassemble that. So let me get my little pliers here, tweezers, pull this out. There we go. I'm actually not being very gentle with this guy because I have zero intention of putting it back together, and I'll explain why. But I realized I needed to unplug this as I was trying to lift this out. We will gently lift this up. This is a little difficult to do with one-handed here because I'm trying to film with the other hand. Let's go ahead and use a little magic. And there we have it, our nice SBC, as we would call it, single board console. I think that's what it stands for. We've got our button pads here. This is what it looks like on the front end, kind of like a Game Boy, similar to a Game Boy. But there's a lot more going on with this guy than a traditional Game Boy board. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and lift this heatsink off here because I don't want to, and I don't want to break anything, but I'll talk a little bit about what kind of power this little guy's packing. A contacted Ambernick sent me an outline of what's actually in their different consoles a while back. This is the RG35xx Plus, not the RG35xx. There is a difference. The RG35xx Plus has a Cortex A53 4-core CPU and 1 GB of DDR4 RAM, which isn't a lot, but it's enough. It also has a Mali G31 MP2 GPU chip on there, which I'm not going to pretend to know the exact efficiencies of that bad boy, but needless to say, like I said, I've run some tests on this thing and was able to get a solid 60 FPS up to Dreamcast games. I believe I was able to get a couple PSP games running on this guy, but I only cared to get it up to Dreamcast, and let me explain why I'm doing all this now. So this is a Tectoy Sega Master System, which you can only really get in Brazil. Tectoy is a company in Brazil that owns the distribution rights to Sega consoles, and to this day still technically makes licensed Sega Master System consoles. This was a console on a chip. The quality wasn't great. I have a Master System over here, and I did a side-by-side of the Tectoy Sega Master System and the classic Sega Master System probably about a year back, and the classic Sega Master System had a far better video quality than this guy did. And when I opened it up, it was kind of a hot-glued mess. It wasn't very good, is what I'm saying. So rather than keep a lower quality Sega Master System, I decided I was going to gut the thing and do something interesting with it. Now I'm cheap. I didn't want to go out and buy a Raspberry Pi 5 when I had this perfectly good RG35xx Plus sitting around collecting dust. I wasn't playing with it very much. So I figured, why not take the board from this guy and configure it so I could put it in this console to create the ultimate Sega console. This board has everything I need. We have the ability to do HDMI output. We could run an SD card extender here to where the controller ports used to be. We could also use something like this USB-C hub here to give us a bit more of an expanded capability, because this thing really only has one USB-C port. Now, I don't really know if this is going to work, so we're going to give it a shot. So I have the USB-C hub hooked to the USB-C port. So this is used for charging the battery and for data transfer to a PC if you were to utilize that. So I have the USB-C hub hooked up with a charger running up here. You can see my whole convoluted setup going here. Here is the micro HDMI cable that came included with the console, which is running to this screen right here. So without a power source, let's see if we can power this and get image on this TV up here. And when I said without a power source, what I meant was without a battery still hooked up to it. Can it run just directly off of a power source? And the initial answer is looking like no. Because when I plug the battery back in and I power it on, I get a little yellow LED light indicating that the battery needs to charge for a little bit. So we're going to let this charge for like 10-15 minutes. And then I'm going to try and power it on and see if we get the image on this screen. If I have to assemble this with a battery hooked up to it, whatever, not a big deal. But I am happy to report that the charging does indeed pass through the USB-C hub here, which means that we've just opened this guy up to be able to do a lot of fun stuff and create a standalone console with it. So with that problem solved, one thing I've learned is that I removed the SD card from that thing, kind of used it for something else while this kind of sat around and did nothing, but it turns out that the operating system for this bad boy was actually flashed onto that SD card, so I've got to create a new SD card with the operating system flashed to it. Good news is I was gonna just update the operating system anyway because the stock operating system kind of sucked. So I guess we'll just do that step now instead. Okay, so first thing I needed was an SD card. I've got a 64 gigabyte SD card in there. It has a capacity for an additional SD card, which we will eventually take advantage of, but at 64 gigabytes good for now. It's got to be formatted in FAT32 for this to work. It kind of already was, but we're just going to reformat the whole thing anyway. Okay, so we're going to use Batacera, and you need a program called Rufus, basically, in order to flash the SD card. It's not as simple as just dragging files onto there, unfortunately. So basically, we're just going to select our SD card, select our .image file, and then we should be good to go ahead and hit start and flash this bad boy. Okay, coming back, it's all done. Now Batacera is loaded to the SD card. So we'll slot our SD card into this main slot here, and you can see I still have one free here that we could take advantage of later. Okay, so we went ahead, got this plugged in. We're going to see if we get an image generated on this screen here from the micro HDMI out, or the mini HDMI out, I should say. I do have a picture on the little handheld screen here. That's a good sign. And there we go. I got a message that said press power button to boot. So let's go. Hold on, something happened. I've got something going on the screen here. Oh, nice. We've got it. All right, so step one's done. We know we can get an image on the screen. We know we can get pass-through charging from this guy. So let's go ahead and run a few more tests to see if this is still going to be viable. All right, next. So typically if I wanted to use an external controller, I would have access to the buttons on the front of this thing, but I don't have that right now, and I don't feel like reassembling it just so that I could do that. So in order to get around this problem, we're going to see if I can use this Type-C hub. I can use this 8-bit DO controller and a USB-C receiver, USB receiver, and be able to use this controller here with just a plug-in solution. All right, so when I plugged it in, I briefly got a message that said Nintendo Pro controller connected and then disconnected. So that's a good sign, I think. Show you the message I'm getting there now. We're going to try a different controller receiver combo here. Those 8-bit DO controllers can be a little temperamental sometimes. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right, so that's a great sign that I don't actually need all the buttons hooked up to this in order to make this work. All right, next, I want to see if I can get video out from this USB-C's HDMI out versus using this mini HDMI out. I'll explain why as I'm doing it. My goal is to do this without having to buy any additional crap to make this happen, and I would much rather use stuff that I own. So I have this kind of HDMI to HDMI adapter. Gotta be honest, I never thought I would find a use for this thing, but here we are. So my goal is that this is basically going to turn into our HDMI port that we would hook up our cable to so that we can get image on the screen here. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to be a great option. So for now, this mini HDMI port is what's just going to have to work for the moment. Alright, so the next question I need to solve is there going to be an issue if we disconnect the screen? Because remember, this is going to be a kind of standalone console going in this shell over here, so we don't necessarily want it connected to, you know, a handheld LCD screen. So let's find out. And some good news, no, not going to be a problem at all. Alright, and the next test I did was booted it off and then boot it back on without the LCD screen attached, just to see if we get right back into this menu. Make sure our controller's working just fine. Beautiful. So we managed to answer a couple important questions. Is this project doable? The answer is yes. We can take this board, we can pretty much remove the power supply, we can remove the screen, we can run an HDMI cable to it, we can run a USB Type-C hub to it so that we can get additional USB functionality, we can get an SD card extender in there, and we can do a lot of fun stuff. This is all good news. Now for the interesting part. Obviously, I want my power button on the outside of the shell here, and it's kind of tough when the power button's over here on the side. So we're gonna have to get this power button off of the board here, which should be fun because I'm not really that good at soldering. Then we essentially need to solder some wires back to this power button and then be able to run the power button to the outside of the shell, giving us a much more traditional console. I'm gonna be completely transparent that I'm not very good at soldering here. This job is probably not going to go well, but I'm gonna do my damnedest. Adding to the challenge, these are very small components here, and I got big old fat sausage fingers, so this should be fun. Long story short, my plan didn't work at all. I'm completely incompetent with soldering. I figured that was going to come. But I did find something interesting out. When I hook this guy up to a power supply without the battery attached, it automatically powers on. So I probably didn't even need to mess with the power button because it seems like we have our solution right there. I don't need to be able to cut the power to the board itself off. I just got to be able to cut the power supply on and off. So definitely a way to do that, probably.
1 week later.
One Amazon order and a haircut later, the solution has arrived. This switch right here is basically going to be my on-off switch for the console. So what this is essentially a USB extender that's currently running to the power supply here. The USB extender is running over to my USB hub with a couple other goodies that I'll get into. But basically, if we just power this bad boy on, it, in turn, powers on our little console here. Is it the fastest boot process I've ever seen? No, not at all. But it works, and that's good enough for me. All right, so let's talk about what else we got from Amazon here. So one, I have a mini HDMI to HDMI adapter here so that I can run a regular HDMI cable to this board and it'll work just fine. Two, I got two USB extenders here so I can utilize these two USB ports and run this to where the controller port would be on the Tectoy Sega Master System console. You can see here I've got one hooked up to a USB receiver for this controller, which I've already tested and it works fine. And then finally a micro SD card extender so that I can run this to the exterior of the console so that I can access the SD card easily. Now the little 64 gigabyte SD card in there isn't really going to cut it once we start putting Dreamcast and Sega Saturn games on this thing, so I got a little bit more of a beefy storage micro SD card with 512 gigabytes on it. Now the fun begins. We're going to have to cram all of this into this in some organized manner. So first thing we're going to do, all the little tabs and hooks here that held in the original boards that came with this thing aren't really necessary, and they're mostly just getting in the way. So we're going to go ahead and remove those. We want a nice flat surface to work with. And that's where these come into play. It's cheap, brittle plastic. These should pop right off without any issue. So here's the orientation I'm batting around with. We're gonna run this micro HDMI to HDMI adapter over here to this little opening here where the two AV ports used to go in on this console. We're gonna obviously remove the middle here and kind of smooth this whole thing out. The SD card extender is gonna fold over top and sit on top of that HDMI port. So the HDMI will be at the bottom, the SD extender here, the SD reader will be at the top, and then our USB Type-C hub is going to run here and sit snugly over here. These two USB extenders are going to run off the hub over here to the controller ports. They're actually a really nice fit. I just got to figure out how to pretty much hold them in place. I feel like I couldn't have planned that any better, honestly. I didn't plan for that at all. I just bought the cheapest looking one off Amazon and figured I would wing it from there. And then the last thing I need to fit in there, this little power switch here. It's going to sit underneath the shell under here. We'll secure it to the top, and then basically we'll be able to just power this bad boy on and off, and it even matches with the power on off button here. Look at that. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to run this little USB power cable over here to another hole that I'll have to create over here to the back so that we can access the power supply from the back. So yeah, you know, we just got to cram all this in there. I'm sure it's going to look great. So I have this little weather strip here, and believe it or not, it's going to be very useful for this project. Again, we're making use of whatever I got on hand. So here's how we'll use it. We're going to wrap it around our USB receiver here, and then when we slot it into the controller port, it's going to hold in place right there. And we'll use just a little bit of hot glue here to hold it in place. And bam, we're going to let that set, and we're going to repeat for the other controller port. And there we go. Looks pretty good. I got to scrape some of that hot glue residue off there, but it came out better than I thought it would. And I realized I wasn't filming when I was doing this, but we basically opened this back up here more so that I could fit an HDMI port and this SD card extender slot through in one hole without having to create any additional holes in this thing, hopefully. And here's the orientation. I'm thinking the SD card adapter on the top here, the HDMI slot on the bottom there, and they actually fit in here really snugly, so we're just going to reinforce this a bit, put a little bit of adhesive on it, and hope it holds. Might not be the prettiest looking solution in the world, but I think it's going to hold, and this is the side that's going to face away anyway, so I don't really care. Okay, so I've got my board flushed up against the plastic right now, and we need to actually hook up these cords and make sure that this orientation makes sense, because I've still got more crap I've got to cram into here. Okay, cool, so we've got the HDMI cable hooked up here, we've got the SD card slot extender, now we just need to get the USB-C dock in here so that I can hook up these USB extenders to it and our power supply. It's not going quite as smoothly as planned. I was hoping that the USB dock could stay flush up against here, but I kind of forgot to account for this. So I moved it over to here, which isn't what I was originally planning for. So now we got to make sure that we do this without the wires horribly bunching up. And remember, I still got to get a power supply switch cable in here, which is going to be interesting. Yeah, we're just going to stuff these wires in here. Yeah, that's good enough. Good thing I'm not selling this to anybody, because So the last piece of this Machiavellian horror show is getting this power supply switch into this slot right here. And there we go. That looks pretty good, actually. And it lines up with the off-on switch, which was completely unplanned for. Glad that worked out. Ignore the, Lovecraftian butchering I did back here with hot glue to get this on there. Whatever, it works. Who cares? Leave me alone. One thing I did notice is that I do need to make one more hole somewhere in this mess so that we can actually run a power supply cable to it. So, let's do it. This feels stupid. And after some work with some pliers, sanding, mess, we did finally create a hole big enough for this thing to actually fit through. I don't know if you see this absolute mess, this atrocious mess of wires here that we're going to have to make work, but, God. At this point, we just need to get it to close. All right, so here we go. We're shoving wires in here. We're making it work. We're going to cram all this together, and then we're going to seal it up, and we're going to pretend that it's all perfect on the inside. And in case anyone asks, because I always get questions like, why don't you sell modded console? This is why. Take a look at this and ask me if you want me to mod a console for you. Okay, I think we got all the wires removed, finally. Let's get this. Fuck. Damn it. That doesn't look quite right. Okay, I think we got it. We just got to put the screws in now. Okay, she's all sealed up now. Everything looks pretty good. Power supply will go in here, which is a little awkward, but, I had to work with what I had. HDMI SD card extender slot back here. let's see if it works. Let's test it out. Okay, we're plugged in. Let's power it on. It takes a long time to load up. Oh my god. And there we go, it works. Oh my god, my little Sega console. Now we just need to test it out, and I could just use a regular controller, but why would we do that since we've already wasted so much time and effort in this when we should use the ultimate Sega controller right here, the Retrofighters D6 wireless gamepad. The reason I picked this controller is because this button layout is the most familiar for just about every Sega console, and this controller is compatible with Dreamcast games as well, so it seemed like the perfect controller for this ultimate Sega system we're creating. Now, I did some tweaks to Bassoterra off camera, and while this board that's in here is capable of doing a whole host of systems, we're calling this the ultimate Sega console, and I only care about Sega systems, so I've got SG-1000, Master System, Mega Drive, Mega CD, Saturn, and Dreamcast on here. 32X is somewhere, but for some reason that's not showing up here on my menu. We'll jump right into Mega Drive. I did not do the work to get the artwork to load in here because I'm lazy and I can do that at a later date. Let's go ahead and fire up Disney's Aladdin. So there's a whole bunch of filters you could throw over this, as with any emulation device. I like to set it to run scanlines so that it looks nicer on an HD TV, because as you know, these old CRTs output a different image than you get with digital, and sometimes if you don't put the scan lines over it, everything looks pretty jagged and rough. Scan lines aren't a perfect recreation of CRTs, but in my opinion, they're the next best thing. Oh yeah, this is working great. Gotta be honest, didn't expect this thing to struggle at all with Mega Drive or Master System. The Saturn is where I'm gonna get nervous, because Saturn was always notoriously difficult to emulate, and these single board consoles do tend to struggle with Sega Saturn. Even some of the higher end ones I got, when I got it default out of the box, they really struggled with Saturn games. So let's see, we're gonna try and boot up Alien Trilogy here and see what happens. You can see the FPS already dropped to 30 FPS. Ooh, that is a rough opening. You can hear that, very choppy, but that's okay. Sometimes that's not indicative of how the game performs. Okay, we did boot into the game. Alright, so it took a while for it to load into the game itself. Let's see how the gameplay fares. And I am holding at a steady 30 FPS. The audio is really choppy. I gotta say, it's not a fantastic experience, but everything's playable, and I'm betting if I run some more tweaks on the back end to try and fix some of the issues and improve performance, I'm betting we can improve quality overall. We can also overclock this thing, which is pretty cool. Right now I have it set to high overclocking. There's still like 2 or 3 levels beyond that. Like, I think there's an extreme option, but I don't know how much heat that's going to generate inside here. There's not really any good ventilation in there, so unsure if that's how hard I want to push it. You can hear the audio is pretty choppy, but it is playable. I will give it that. We're going to give the Saturn performance like a C- or something. Now let's check out Dreamcast. So Dreamcast is the most recent console that I have on here, but Dreamcast emulation tends to be pretty solid, and I've used the RG35xx Plus for Dreamcast games and got a steady 60 FPS. I don't know why it would be any different. Obviously, we have a different operating system here with Bassoterra, but let's check it out. We'll try Tony Hawk's Pro Skater here. I got 30 FPS going, dropping 25, 30 FPS. Ugh, that's not great, but I can probably do some system tweaks here to get it better. And we got into some gameplay, not very good. We're getting like 10 FPS, really choppy audio. I'm not sure what's going on with the emulation here, because on the stock RG35xx Plus, Dreamcast emulation was actually pretty good on it. Alright, so one more thing we're going to try. We're going to go into the menu here, and we're going to mess with the overclock. We're going to go to extreme. Extreme. And then we just got to do a quick reboot. Now let's go ahead and give Dreamcast a shot again and hope for better results this time. It is holding it at 30 FPS at least. Choppy ass audio again. And now that we're in the game, I am getting much better performance this time around, but I'm having audio issues still. It's just cutting out. I don't know why the audio is doing that. I did a little research and found out that this is kind of an unsupported version of Bassoterra, meaning the devs for Bassoterra don't actually support this. on this device, the RG35xx Plus. So you're kind of relying on people who are doing forks for this thing, and unfortunately it seems like nobody has a fully mapped out solution for this particular setup, because let's be honest, I don't think anybody expected a handheld device to be turned into a sit-down console. And there we go, audio cut back in mid-sentence there, but we are getting 30 FPS. We're getting, patchy audio, but it is coming through, so I would say that there probably is a solution somewhere in here. One I'm not going to find right now, and the audio cut out again. So, the Tectoy Sega Master System RG35xx Plus merge project, was it worth it? No, not really. The results really didn't justify all the work it took to get to this point. I do think that I need to flash it with the stock operating system, the one that came with the Anbernic Plus device, and try and see if I just get better results using that. I like the UI of Bassetera better, but you got to do what works. I'm not going to do that now because that's a lot of work and I'm kind of over this, but I gotta say, as a display piece, I like the way this looks a lot better. It is a little, not my finest, most neat work, but from a distance it looks pretty nice. It does play Master System and Mega Drive very, very well, so in that respect it is significantly better than the stock Tectoy Sega Master System, so I can say that it is a massive improvement. Working USB ports are also nice, and of course having an HDMI output back there, I know that's very sloppy, I need to clean that up, is also very nice, and the ability to pop in an SD card, add ROMs, things like that. Those are things you could not do with the stock Tectoy Sega Master System that we can now do. At the end of the day, we took two pieces of technology that were not getting any use in my home, the Tectoy Sega Master System and the Anbernic RG35xx Plus. We merged them together and created something that I probably will use more frequently. I actually think that this is going to work out very well for a video game club that I volunteer at my daughter's elementary school. I can bring this in and pretty easily set it up and have access to just a ton of games, especially on Sega Week when I bring in all the Sega systems that I have. It'll be nice just to have an extra option, especially a more modern option that I can hook up to an HDMI TV. And also the project did force me to finally go out and get this controller I've had my eye on for a while, so I'll call it a win in that regard. Like and subscribe for the next stupid project I might try. You never know.